Hello, everybody, and welcome to proPUCKERS Episode 9, part of the Tundra Enthusiast News Network. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined this time by Blain Potvin, who covers the Montreal Canadiens for the Hockey Writers, and he hosts a podcast called Habs Unfiltered. Check that out. And I'm joined by Brooke Lofurno, who covers the Chicago Blackhawks for the Hockey Writers. So we'll start with you, Brooke. How are you doing? And an icebreaker I ask all our first-time guests is what age or what point did you realize you're more likely to be writing about hockey and sports in general than playing it?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. And as far as the Blackhawks go, I always knew I was a good writer and I always knew I liked hockey because I grew up around it and stuff. But it was probably around high school when the Blackhawks won their second Stanley Cup against the Boston Bruins in 2013. That's when I really got more into it and more interested, especially with the personalities they had on the team at the time. It was just really fun to watch and really engaging. So, and I could never be an athlete. I never was an athlete. I tried. I'm not good at sports, but I love watching sports. And I always go by what the movie Grease says about if you can't be an athlete, then be an athletic supporter. So that's what I am. And I love what I do.
Yeah, 2013, those were good times in Chicago with the Blackhawks. So Blain, how are you doing? And same question, what point did you realize you're more likely to be writing about hockey than playing it?
I'm doing pretty good. And when did I realize? Well, I was about 16, about 500 years ago, and realized I wasn't good enough to really make a career out of it. So I took a hiatus for about 400 years and started writing about 8 years ago with another site when I met up with a group in Florida for the NHL Draft, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, that's great. Mentioning 400 years ago, I guess you remember when the NHL was founded back in the day, back in 1917.
Well, let's put it this way. I remember the Canadians dynasty of the 70s.
Yeah, that's a while back for some of us. But we're going to talk about teams that are starting to build their dynasties with the NHL Draft. I guess you could say it all starts in the draft. What I love about the NHL is that there's no one way you can build a championship caliber team. Whereas you look at basketball where you have the number one pick and you could draft a generational talent, or even in football, you have if you could draft a generational quarterback, change your dynamics. And the NHL, you can't just draft your way to the top. There's a development curve, there's free agency, there's just all these team building aspects. But we just completed the draft and I kind of want to look at this from a different angle where the dust is settled. We knew who was going to go one, and which teams won the draft. Which teams, I guess you could say, like it's really concerning how they did in the draft. So the way I want to look at the winners of the draft is which teams really changed their timeline. Where you look at them now and you're like, they can really contend even next season or be a playoff team next season, or even a team that was on the borderline and really leaped into that contention, or two, a team that part two of this is a team that is going to be a really good team, a juggernaut team. You look at this draft that really helped our cause. I'll start with Blain. Which team are you looking at? Which teams that really stood out to you with this in mind?
I'm not a big fan of calling winners and losers, like based on other teams' performances. It's more, the way I see it, it's more, did that team get what they needed, or did that team completely fail at filling any needs? And I think in my opinion, the biggest winner at the draft, and it had less to do with the picks, but more to do with the moves they made, is Utah. They went out and got themselves a top pair in two trades, and then they got Tija Gidna with their first pick. So to me, that's a win.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Where it's like it also seems, I think you could take a step back and say the way Utah's building now or the way they're operating is a lot different, just because new ownership group and obviously the whole situation with Arizona, that how that unraveled, and now it's a new era where Ryan Smith as an owner saying, I'm not going to do this rebuild too long, or I want to sell seats right away. And you're starting to see an aggressive owner try to make these moves. And I mean, Bill Armstrong's been there, so he's kind of coming in from his perspective. I guess it's also he's saying like we've done this rebuild for a bit. Now I want to accelerate it. I guess I'm kind of wondering on that if you had to take, do you think this is more of the ownership group saying I want Ryan Smith, the owner, saying I want to accelerate the timeline, or is Bill Armstrong, who's been around for a while, saying like we've done the rebuild already, now we're ready to take the next step? Where do you see this coming from? Because they have really been aggressive.
Yeah, it's an ownership group that has money to spend and is willing to spend it. I don't think they had that in Arizona. Now they show up in Utah. The ownership group wants to put on a good show, and they've added pieces to that former Coyotes team that I think will make it a significant contender, at least to compete for a playoff spot. So the fans in Utah at least will get a good show.
Yeah. I guess, Brooke, before we dive into your winner, like, what are your quick thoughts on Utah, how they've done? Because it has been different from how they've operated in the past. I mean, it's either you could either see it as they're accelerating their timeline because Bill Armstrong already had the Coyotes already had the pieces in place, and now it's like we just need those next steps. Or B, it's a little bit of an owner who's like, I'm ready to, I want to sell seats, I want to compete now. What are your quick thoughts on Utah before I guess dive into a winner, unless they were your winner?
I actually really like what Utah has done, and it's kind of disappointing because I think this action that they've done actually in the past couple days is actually what Arizona deserved. I think the Coyotes actually deserved, and now they're finally getting it. Unfortunately, it's coming at the expense of a different location, but it's still good to see. I always thought Arizona was actually on the right track as far as their team goes. They had a lot of good talent. They were a tough matchup for the Blackhawks last year, but technically a lot of teams, most teams were a tough matchup for the Blackhawks last year. But I really like what they're doing though. They're being aggressive, and honestly, kudos to the management, because being a sports owner, you have to be aggressive. You should be aggressive. This is pro sports. You should do it. So I'm really happy to see it. And actually, I was going to say Utah was probably on my list of, I think, one of the winners just because of how aggressive they've been. And I love to see it. I think it's great for the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be frustrating. I guess you could say it's two sides where Utah's going to get, if they can get a competitive team, it's going to be frustrating for all those Coyotes fans that had to sit through the rebuild for all those years, lose their team, and then immediately see it do well elsewhere. I mean, you see a lot of relocation stories like that. I mean, the Browns losing the Ravens is just a cross sports reference, or even Quebec, the Colorado Avalanche, their first year in Colorado after leaving Quebec City, they win the Stanley Cup. I don't see Utah doing that, but it is interesting. It's going to be an interesting question, especially if they become competitive. But Brooke, if you had any other teams on your mind for winners or losers, if you have any, let's hear.
I mean, I guess I'll point out my team first, just because I'm a Blackhawks writer. But I think there was some points where I was like, I was kind of wary about what they did, in the sense of maybe I'm just not as educated, obviously, as the NHL scouts were. But they did pick the players that honestly they like speed, they like athleticism, they like strength, and obviously lately they've been liking size. So obviously they got John Mustard, they got that Sasha Boisvert, and obviously even they got Artem Levshunov with the second overall pick. So I would say they picked exactly how you would expect them to pick, and that's pretty good, I think, to have that expectation of knowing what they like and they stick to that plan. So I'll say for them, they did a pretty good job, and hopefully it works out for them down the road. But yeah, and I was talking to Blain before the show, and I was like, Montreal, my hat's off to Montreal. I do think they probably had the best night on night one when they got Demidov and Page. So, I mean, hard to disagree there.
Yeah, I mean, well, so let's talk. I mean, with Chicago, the Blackhawks, it was John Mustard was the player I think we all wanted our team secretly to draft, just to have some extra mustard on our team. But let's talk about the Canadians a bit, because that was actually one of the teams I was thinking in the back of my head entering this draft. I was thinking this team is one like elite, not necessarily superstar, but one core player away from being like, we're there, we have all the pieces in place, we're ready to take that next step. And I think Burma taking a step back with Montreal, it's Marty St. Louis has been a promising coach. He's done a lot. He's done well with the rebuild. the expectations are starting to change a bit, especially the way Slafkovsky came on the scene last year, especially with you have Cole Caulfield, you have Nick Suzuki. Kirby Doc is going to come back. He's the former Blackhawk. He got traded. It's one of those trades. It's a win-win trade sort of thing. They have all the pieces now. There's like, they just need that one superstar or one, really just one core player left. And I kind of want to wonder, Blain, covering the Canadians, how do you feel they did in this draft? Because one of the star players, one of the elite prospects in this class, fell to them at 5.
Well, I do believe that any successful rebuild takes a little bit of luck. And in this case, Montreal was lucky to have Demidov slide to 5th so they can pick him. I think you're right. The Canadians really did need that star power, because I think Demidov he's a game-breaking player. He'll lift you out of your seat, but with one shot, he'll change the outcome of a game. So they were missing that. So they got it. So you add Michael Hage to that mix. You add a little bit of Montreal Canadiens royalty by picking Koivu, his father being the former captain of the team, and the rest of the draft. I think they did fairly well. The goal was to bring in skill, but with size, and I think they hit that with all of it, because the Canadians over the last 30 some odd years have been plagued as a smaller team. Now under Hughes, they're much larger, they're much more skilled, and I think you're right, the expectations are changed. It's no longer did this individual player improve, but now it's will the team improve?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Here's a team that I had off the radar a bit, which I think is one of the teams that I was like, I like what they did here in a sense, is the Minnesota Wild, where you can make an argument that the player they took in the first round was a top 5 prospect, or even certainly top 10, who slid to them at 12. They made the move to get him. And then you look at their draft overall, they went out and got defense and addressed defense. They, I think, used 3 or 4 selections on that position. And with the Wild, I've thought about it, is their weakness when you look at they have the skill in the forward position with Kaprizov, with Matsu Gurel. They have the skill in the forward position. They just needed some extra reinforcements to go along with Brock Faber. You add Byam, right? Zeev Byam, one of these elite defensemen who could really, already he changed the dynamics. And then you add extra reinforcements. You're really just shoring up that unit. And I'll start with Brooke. What do you think? Like, their division rival. What do you think? What do you think of their draft? How they went out and just really fixed it. I would say fixed one unit. It's going to take time, but for them to go out and address a need that they have.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, Minnesota, like you said, has always been a very fierce competitor to the Blackhawks, a fierce rival too. And actually, I think you're right, because I actually thought of Minnesota in the back of my head too when I saw that they traded with Philadelphia. I was like, uh-oh, where is this going? And then I was actually, when I saw that they picked Zeev, I was like, actually, Brock Faber and Zeev, like maybe in the future. I was like, that's kind of nice. So I mean, like I said, I actually hats off to them. They were pretty aggressive in, trading up to get him when he wasn't even, like you said, expected to fall in that spot. So yeah, like I said, I think they had a pretty good night for sure.
Yeah, he fell into their lap. Yeah, Blain. I mean, anything to add to that? I mean, it's just. I mean, that's for them. It's like a solid night. I don't know if necessarily you think of the Wild for compared last season. I think for them was a bump in the road type of season where they are a playoff team to begin with, but for them to then make this move, I'm kind of wondering, would you say this almost like puts them in a different conversation, or is it no, it's just going to get them back to the playoffs type of thing, or what does this class? I mean, it's more of a long-term thing anyway, but how do you see the way they address this draft, especially with defense, changing things for them, if at all?
Well, it looks to me like more of a retool on the fly, and picking up someone like Buem to go with Brock Faber. Now you have a 1-2 punch on the left side that can feed the puck up to Kaprizov. I mean, that's their offense right there. I think Bill Guerin's going to be able to add a few more pieces here over the summer, and I do feel like Minnesota is going to be able to punch their way back in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering, are they not, maybe not next year, but maybe with this group coming into the when they're ready and Kaprizov's still in his prime and they still have that the elite forward talent still there, if that kind of changes, if they're all of a sudden a cup team, or they're still a few pieces away from that.
I don't think they have all the pieces they need to really be a cup contender. Uh, do they have enough once Boom is in the league to, make the playoffs and see what happens? I think that's more of where they're at right now. They definitely need a couple more pieces.
Interesting, because I'm just seeing it. I'm like, I feel like that was their need, and then it's like, okay, they went out and addressed it, and it's like, wow, it really changes things for them, because you look at their defense last year with like Brock Faber and everyone else, and now if you just have another, especially if BM becomes an elite two-way defenseman, elite defenseman who takes them over the top, it really changes things. I guess let's shift gears real quickly to some of the teams that I guess are a little concerned, or you want to say, I don't want to call them losers necessarily, because especially when a draft takes time, but teams that it's like, okay, I'm a little cautious about what they did, or a little concerned, or how they approach this draft, or whether they whiffed or whatever, or just their overall outlook heading into the draft or now following it. Which teams stand out to you? We'll start with you, Brooke. Which team necessarily are you thinking about?
Yeah, like you said, maybe not necessarily losers, but just some I question. Let's put it that way. Like just teams I question, maybe. I will say the first team that came into my brain was the Washington Capitals. That was one team I really questioned on night one, because I genuinely thought when it got to them that they would probably pick Cole Eiserman. That felt like a gift that he was even there. And I heard that they might be going defense there, but I think even the guy they picked was shocked that he went there as well, that Tarek Parasak. But like I said, hindsight's 50-50. That guy might end up actually being a steal, but that was just one that, like I said, he's probably a great player and really happy for him, but I was just more surprised that they went that route. Let's put it that way.
And I think
And also
yeah,
the Flyers. That was the other team that stood out to me. I would say it's just being kind of confused by what they were doing.
Yeah, it was also Cole Eisman was the other player that kept sliding. So you're surprised that the Capitals didn't take him. The Capitals also are one of the teams that you wonder what direction they're heading in, because you feel like they maybe need a rebuild, but then it's like then they make moves that reflect they're not going to do that. In general, it's one of those teams you got to figure out what's going on. But yeah, it's one of those teams. Blaine, anything to add on the Capitals or Flyers, or if you have a team that you want to you were thinking about before that kind of got into your head now because of the Capitals or Flyers coming up?
Well, I agree with the Flyers. It was a bit confusing. I mean, getting Luchenko, good player,
Mm-hmm.
and trading back to get him to get another asset, great. But I don't know, it just seemed a little unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that they needed centers, so he addressed the need. Washington, the way I see it, they're doing everything they can to give Ovechkin the opportunity to try and break Gretzky's record. So they're just holding on. With the Parasak pick, I think that's really good. It's a 105 or 110 point player at 17th. Why not? But the one team that really, really had me confused was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm not just saying this because I cover the Canadians. The moves they made during this draft made no sense to me. Trading back to pick up more assets, that made sense. But picking up Danforth, who's prospect that they could have had in the second round anyway, and they pick him up late in the first. I know they need defensemen, but there were other defensemen that were rated higher. So I don't know what the Leafs saw in him, but it had to be something good.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like if you're going to take him, why not just wait later to get him if you feel like he's going to be available? I mean, that's also one of the questions. Maybe they knew something that like we don't, where it's like, oh, the league is higher on a player than we also than we are. We're on our draft boards, but yeah, it is interesting. I mean, and also for Toronto, where I mean, trading. I mean, they're one of those teams that I guess they usually are the team that trades out of the first round. It's like their thing, uh, but yeah, like I mean, it is interesting to see. Like, I mean, they're in that case where how do we keep making moves to keep us in that contending window while also resetting? And it is going to be interesting to see how they how they develop, how they tackle that dilemma or how they tackle that, especially with the draft, which just happened.
I mean,
So yeah,
I like what they did getting Tanev's rights,
yeah.
but they have to sign him to make it worthwhile. They desperately need that defenseman to actually try and help this team be able to get past the first round. For a team that's supposedly a cup contender, um, show me a team that could actually contend like that. They haven't shown that yet. When you're up 3-1 to the Canadians, who are clearly a lesser team, and the Habs just walk over you, that's a problem.
Yeah, that was the few years back. The Tanev, the Tanev deal, which they're gonna presumably resign him. It just actually good way to shift gears a bit, but just talking about the Tanev deal. I first thought of it and I was like, oh, this is great. Like Tanev, veteran who improved the Stars defense, and he's great. He played well in the playoffs, and you're getting him in. It's a type of deal Maple Leafs would make. And then I thought about it, I'm like, this is kind of like the Giordano move, just a few years younger. It just feels like they're repeating. It's almost like it's interesting because like the Maple Leafs said they're not going to repeat the same things or are not going to go through the same motions. And then the Tanev deal does feel like it's a Giordano move just a few years earlier. And it just feels like they're going through the same cycles, except for change the head coach and the new management technically, but it just feels that way a bit. I guess anyone, Blaine, if you have quick thoughts, and then we'll have them, and then what up? Yeah.
No, you pretty much covered it. I mean, I'm still scratching my head at the Leafs. So, yeah, go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah.
I don't really have any thoughts either. Like I said, I think the Leafs are always they're doing something. And like I said, we'll see if it works out. I like some of the moves they make, so we'll see, but I really don't have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean but then with Chris Tanev, he reminds me of the let's kind of with shifting gears a bit, with some of the moves that have already happened, which is like we're heading into free agency. By the time anyone who's watching this might actually watches this, there might be a lot more moves that have a lot more significance. But let's do quick fire. In this quick fire, what I'll do is I'll mention the trade, first sentence that comes to mind on the trade, and just quickly one sentence on the deal and what you think of it. So I'll start with you, Blaine. Jake Gensel traded from the Hurricanes to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
In a vacuum, that's a good trade for Tampa.
Brooke, quickly, Jake Gensel traded from the Hurricanes to the Lightning.
That was a good last ditch effort trade to try to keep the window open.
Yeah. My quick sentence is the Lightning are still doing that thing with the Lightning, like keeping that competitive window open. Yeah, that's pretty much what I got. Let's quickly Tanner Jeannot to the Kings, Brooke.
Okay, I guess doesn't feel like doesn't feel like much.
Doesn't feel like yeah, depth player moving. Really, it's the vacuum. I mean, really, it's the bigger picture. The Lightning open up cap space. Blaine, quick, Tanner Jeannot Kings. Anything
Again,
there?
a win for Tampa Bay. I think they were able to get rid of a contract that they no longer need, and they suckered LA into taking it.
Yeah. Speaking of LA trades, Pierre-Luc Dubois to Washington, Brooke.
I am confusion. I hope it works out for Pierre-Luc Dubois in Washington.
Yeah. Blaine, quickly. Pierre-Luc Dubois traded from the Kings to the Capitals. Darcy Kemper was part
All
of
I
the
know
deal
is,
too.
yeah, I know in Montreal, everyone's super happy he chose LA now.
Yeah. Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. I'll just say figure it out in Washington. That's all I can say is
Yeah,
can't drag yourself
hopefully.
out of another town. He was I believe he was drafted by Columbus. It's been that long. Drafted by Columbus, goes to Winnipeg, goes to LA, and then just 1 year after signing an 8-year deal, he's already in Washington. And at this point, you really, yeah. Anyway, enough of that. So this one's relevant because for Blain, Jonathan Kovacevic traded from the Canadians to the Devils. Quick thoughts.
It's good asset management by Hughes. He used a waiver pickup, and they end up with a 4th-round pick. It's also a good move for Kovacevic, who's going to join a good team and actually provide solid play on a third pair.
Brooke Kovacevic now on the Devils.
I'll take Blain's word for it because I honestly do not know enough about him to comment either way.
Yeah, my quick thought when I saw it was Montreal must be real confident in the defensive core that's coming up. Which, I mean, I guess like real quickly, Blain, if you can confirm.
Oh yeah. There's Montreal's defensive prospects are probably the deepest in the entire NHL. There's quite a few on the way up right now, and just on the right side, Reinbacher, Mailloux, they've got right-handed defensemen coming up who are clearly higher on the depth chart.
That was the first thing that I was thinking about. I mean, sure, it helps the Devils, and they did need this type. They did need to improve their defense, but yeah, that's because I usually don't think of Kovacevic type of player that a team would trade away, especially for the Canadians. But what this says to me is really, yeah, they have the confidence that their young core that's coming up. So I guess that's pretty much all we got. So before we head out, let's do any plugs that either of you have. We'll start with you, Brooke. Any articles you're working on? Where can we find you? Any big stuff in the works that you could share with us in the meantime right now?
Yes, you can find me obviously at thehockeywriters.com. You can follow me at Twitter at Brooke_Lofo, LOFO. I should have put that in my little name thing on here on Zoom. But right now I will be covering after day 1 of free agency. So hopefully the Blackhawks do something interesting and give me something to work with here because I'm a little worried.
Yeah, they have someone that they could add along with Connor Bedard. I mean, aside from through the pipeline, which they've done a good job with that, but maybe add someone like Taylor Hall, but a little bit better and more healthy, hopefully. That's, I guess, fingers crossed they get that done. Blain, where can we find you? We know about the podcast, Habs Unfiltered, but any big articles in the works, or any big plugs you could have? I guess you could plug podcast also if you want, but any plugs you want to share now?
Yeah, absolutely. Habs Unfiltered, the podcast that I host. The Hockey Writers, you'll find a lot of my articles there. Recruits, I do a lot of scouting with them, and a little bit of here and there and everywhere. So just check me out on social media under my own name, Blain Potvin.
Yeah, and you can find me at the Hockey Writers. I also do some stuff for the Tundra Enthusiast News Network now. You can find this podcast also on the site and on YouTube. And that's all we got. So thank you for watching. Please, this is the 9th episode. So we've got recent Stanley Cup winner Sam Bennett. We've got Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey. And with Brooke on, I feel it's appropriate. We got to go with Bobby Hull. So thank you very much for watching this another episode of proPUCKERS. And please tune in next time for another great episode. Please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you.